You're watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV from Toronto, Ontario. I'm Catherine Bullock. Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace. Today, an interview with author Ismael Mukhtar of a new book about the history of Manitoba Muslims. First, some news headlines. Islamic Heritage Month exhibition displayed at Ottawa City Hall. Trial for London terrorist attacker scheduled for November. Toronto School Board holds event highlighting Islamophobia through cooking. University of Montana professor on leave following anti-Islam comments on personal blog. And killer of British MP is in custody with charges of murder. And now some details. Various Muslim communities in Ottawa came together on Tuesday to hold an exhibition at Ottawa's City Hall. Islamic institutions and communities, as well as the public, were invited to browse the display. The exhibit featured contributions of Muslim inventors from fields of mathematics, history, and science. It also displayed intricate pieces of calligraphy, prayer rugs, and clothes. Most notably, the exhibit displayed over 75 translations of the Quran into various languages. City Hall coordinated this effort following a press release from the federal government early this month. The statement had called for events on Islamic Heritage Month to combat all forms of discrimination, Islamophobia, and hate-fueled violence directed at Muslim communities. Nathaniel Veltman's trial has been adjourned until November 17th. Veltman was responsible for deliberately killing a Muslim family of 4 in London, Ontario, in a hate-fueled terrorist attack. The charges laid against Veltman include 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. This is in addition to charges of terrorism. Veltman's attack killed 3 generations within the Afzal family while they were out for an evening stroll. This included Salman Afzal, his mother, wife, and daughter. Afzal's son was left with serious injuries. The Toronto District School Board's Islamic Heritage Month Committee has teamed up with Islamic Relief Canada to celebrate Islamic Heritage Month. They will be holding an online community cooking event. The event will feature Reem Ahmed, a former contestant of MasterChef Canada. It will be held on October 22nd online through Zoom and is free for all those interested. Ahmed was the first hijabi contestant to compete on MasterChef Canada. In the upcoming event, Ahmed plans to speak about Islamophobia and her experience growing up as a Muslim in Canada. She will be joined by Maliha Sheikh, a journalist with City News Toronto. Computer science professor Rob Smith from the University of Montana has been placed on a paid leave following derogatory comments written on his blog. The comments were directed towards women and Muslims in particular. He wrote that Muslims are only peaceful to the degree that they are not Muslims. Over 150 students had gathered to protest his employment at the university. The university, however, cannot fire Smith due to protection from his First Amendment rights. And a 25-year-old man appeared in court on Thursday charged with the murder of British MP David Ames. Ames was killed as he met constituents at a church hall. This was the second such casualty of a British MP in the last 5 years. Ali Harbi Ali, who was arrested at the scene of the killing last Friday, also faces a separate charge of preparing acts of terrorism. He is to be kept in custody until an administrative hearing at the Central Criminal Court on Friday. Nick Price, head of the Special Crime and Counter-Terrorism Unit, said lawyers would submit that Ames's killing had a terrorist connection, namely that it had both religious and ideological motivations. That's it for the news. And now our interview with author Ismael Mukhtar about his book about the history of Muslims in Manitoba. Welcome to the show, Brother Ismael. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
It's Islamic History Month in Canada, and once upon a time there weren't very many resources for us to turn to if we wanted to look at the history of Muslims in Canada. And now we're lucky to have a book by yourself, Manitoba Muslims, A History of Resilience and Growth. Tell us why you decided to write this book.
Well, thank you again for inviting me. I guess this book basically talks about the history of Muslims in the province of Manitoba. Muslims have a history that goes back all the way to the early 1900s. So we are talking about a history of 120 years. This history has not been written before or documented. So I thought it was time to document the history and make sure that this history was not lost or forgotten.
Was there a particular incident or anecdote or conversation that sparked you? I mean, not everyone would say, there's no history of Muslims in Manitoba, let me write a book. That's quite an undertaking.
Yeah. First of all, I mean, I've been here in the community for a long time. I've been in different leadership positions, so I have an intimate knowledge of the history of the community for the last 30 years. But at the same time, also, many of our elders who came in the 50s and the 60s, they are now in their 80s and 70s, some of them in their 90s. So, their memory is fading. Many of them passed away. So I felt that there is some urgency to document the history before this generation disappears. Our history before the 50s, unfortunately, a good chapter of it is lost, but with the research I did, I managed to capture some of it. So, yeah, just
so
to make sure.
What kind of research did you do? How did you capture that early history from the 1900s? What did you find? What documents?
Yeah, I think my main resource was the archives of the newspapers at that time. The local newspapers in Winnipeg, they were very helpful. Stats Canada data was helpful. And also some of the literature available. One of the books that I found very helpful was the book of Richard Howard. His father came to Manitoba in 1901. So he documented the history of the early immigrants who came around the same time. So a combination of books, newspapers, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Yours is the first book that I'm aware of focused on Manitoba. You mentioned Richard Awad's. He has a broader scope. Does he?
Can you repeat the question, please?
So you focused on Manitoba.
Yeah.
Why did you choose to focus only on Manitoba and not write a sort of like a bigger history of Muslims in the prairies or the West or something like that?
Well, I guess that will be a major undertaking. I found this one within my reach because I'm part of that history. So I guess that's starting point. But maybe this could put me in a better position to look at the bigger history, the prairie, or even something bigger. But to start with, this was a beginning. Yeah.
You must have a lot of patience. I mean, sifting through all those newspaper. Was it microfiche? Is it online now?
Yeah, it's online. It's available online. The Winnipeg Free Press, Winnipeg Tribune, Brandon Sun, and so on and so forth. Yeah. And it wasn't always easy because you search by Islam, you search by Mohammedans, the spelling is not consistent, the names are different. So yeah, it wasn't that easy, but I managed to capture some good information. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite story of one of the people you learnt about from that time?
Well, I guess one person was Najib Ali. Najib Ali was basically the mastermind of the first mosque in Canada, which is Al-Rashid Mosque. Something probably I didn't know, and many people did not know, that he was a resident of Manitoba for 20 years. And when he undertook the Al-Rashid Mosque project, there was an article about that in the Winnipeg Tribune saying that former Norwood resident, that's the neighborhood he was living in, that the former Norwood resident is spearheading the first mosque in Canada. So that was something very interesting to know. As well, many of the key founders of Rashid Mosque, I found out also, they were former residents of Manitoba, because Manitoba was the gateway to the prairie at that time.
Do you know why, if they were formerly in Manitoba, but they built the first mosque in Alberta, why they didn't build it in Manitoba?
Well, that's an interesting question. For some reason, a good number of those who came to Manitoba ended up moving to Edmonton. Probably it was more favorable for their business, the fur trade. And there was also expectations that the north will be open, and it was believed that there will be lots of rich mineral resources. So probably they felt that was a better place to be for future for their business advancement. So that's one possible reason.
How has the Muslim community of Manitoba, been reacting to your book?
I think overall very positive, because as I mentioned, this is the first time the history is being written, particularly those who have been here for a long time. We're a community that's a mix of newcomers and people who have been here for a long time. And those who came recently probably outnumber those who came earlier. But overall, the community has been, received the book very positively, and people are reading through and asking questions and opening some interesting discussions.
Was there a story that you came across that you hesitated to include, you weren't sure, and in the end you did include it?
Well, not any particular story, but like any other communities, that there were some difficult moments in the history of the community, and I was reluctant to include them. But I felt, if you're writing history, you have to write everything. So initially, I wasn't sure how much detail I should provide, and so my first draft was full of much details, but then I did a revision and I made it much concise, and I deleted much of the details. I thought perhaps those were not relevant, but I captured the main aspects of what happened at that time. Yeah.
So you said earlier that people were reading and asking you interesting questions. Is that something that they've been asking you about? Like, why did you include this, or washing our dirty laundry in public, or, gee, I wish you hadn't mentioned that. Have you had those kinds of responses?
Not at this stage. I mean, when I was writing my book, I had some people to review it and give me some of their feedback. Yeah, at that time, my reviewers gave me, yeah, it's fine to include it, but you've gone too much details. And they said, you know what, people might focus on that and not look at the other aspects, positive history of the community. So yeah, I made it more concise, and yeah, I haven't heard anything since the book was published, but this was a feedback I received from some of my reviewers.
You mentioned that one of the things that sparked you to write it was you were worried about the elders passing away and us not knowing their stories. So why do you think we should care about their stories? What do we learn from knowing this?
Well, I guess first of all, we have deep roots in this country. There is a wide perception within our community that our history goes back to 1960. Now, after going through all the historical archives, I found that no, our history goes back to early 1900s. So knowing our history is important, so we know how deep our roots in this country is. We are not just recent comers. We have been here from the early days, and we are contributors to the Canada of today, to the Manitoba of today. So that's one thing very important. Secondly, also, we as a community, we are part of the larger society, and we want to fight hate, we want to find Islamophobia. And one way is for people to know who we are and what our history is and what our contribution was. So, from that perspective, I think it is important to tell our story. And when we all share our story, we can have a better and more inclusive understanding of who we are.
Well, we're very grateful that you took the time to go through all those archives and the toil and sweat that goes into writing a book. So thank you very much, and thanks for telling us about it on today's show.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
That's it from us. Stay tuned for the next episode. You've been watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Stay safe and God bless.